This guy's looking quite sad. Look at the eyebrows on this one. Nearly frowning. Very entertaining facial features in the eyes, the eyebrows. So this one here, quite a flat nose. And this one here, more normal. There's some similarities between the warriors, like some chins or the mouths, the eyes, the nose, but they're all very unique. I think this is incredibly exciting, and I'm just astounded that they could be produced in these sort of numbers and made so individual.
8,000 individuals. But were they portraits of the emperor's soldiers? Or products of the warrior maker's imaginations? We'll never know. But one thing is clear. Creating 8,000 clay individuals made the job of producing the terracotta warriors even harder than it seems.
Human-sized statues are definitely harder than small statues to make. Whoever came up with the idea might not have known how difficult making them was going to be.
On a day forever lost to history, the order came down. 8,000 unique figures, all to be ready on the unknown day the emperor died. All of them strong enough to survive for an eternity underground. And all of them beautiful and realistic enough to please the imperial eye. No one in China had ever been given a job like this. And failure was not an option. Day 1 of terracotta warrior production. Around 221 BC. What was it like to face the challenge of making life-size soldiers out of clay when you'd never done it before? Just ask this man. And this one. Jiang Binruo and Han Pingqi make terracotta warriors for a living. Their factories turn out thousands of terracotta warrior replicas every year. A thriving business feeding a worldwide fascination with the first emperor's army of clay.
Our terracotta warriors are exported to countries like the United States, Germany, Japan, United Kingdom, and France. We manufacture around 50,000 small terracotta warriors each year, and about 200 full-size figures. Besides the traditional statues, we also modify some elements according to our clients' needs. This warrior is playing golf. We made it for our client, the Yajian Golf Club. The golf club gives it to winners as a trophy.
After more than 25 years in the replica business, Jiang Binruo and Han Pingqi have learned the hard way what the original warrior makers faced. Like their ancient predecessors, they've had to figure out warrior making step by step, trial and error. And just like ancient times, the problem was one of scale.
We started to make 40 centimeters, 50 centimeters, and finally, like this one half of human size, about 1 meter tall. Tourists wanted even bigger sizes. We went through many difficulties.
First challenge, using the right clay. Sounds simple, but it isn't. You can make bricks or a small tomb figurine out of just about any clay. But a typical terracotta warrior stands nearly 2 meters tall and weighs up to 300 kilograms. Use the wrong clay to make a statue that big, and it will collapse. So what's the right clay? One that's dense and sticky enough to hold together as it loses water and dries out, but not so dense that it won't let air inside to dry it out. Today, or 2,000 years ago, success depends on finding a clay that's tough enough to make a life-sized warrior. Jiang Binro searched far and wide until some 17 kilometers away from the Terracotta Warriors, he finally found a clay that could stand up to the job.
This is called red clay. It is sticky and strong. We searched many places and could not find anywhere else with this much red clay. But we find that this place has a lot. Now we only use red clay from here to make terracotta warriors. 2,000 years ago, I think terracotta warriors would have been impossible to make with any other soil or clay.
For the first emperor's craftsmen, finding the right clay would have solved the first big problem of making a life-size warrior. But it would not have solved an even bigger problem: how to make thousands of them, and fast. The first emperor died in 210 BC, only 11 years after he ordered his terracotta army. To finish 8,000 warriors in 11 years, his craftsmen must have made over 700 a year, more than 3 times the annual number of life-size figures modern replica makers produce. How did they do it? One clue comes not from the warriors themselves, but from something they once held in their hands. Yang Fuzi is a 10th generation bowmaker. He makes replicas of ancient Chinese crossbows, like the ones once held by some terracotta warriors. Even today, the hardest part is casting the crossbow's metal trigger, a challenge that's made Yang deeply respectful of the men who made those triggers 2,000 years ago.
We found one trigger at one city and another trigger at another city that is 2,000 miles away. Parts of the trigger are exchangeable. In modern terms, these are standardized parts. I don't know how they designed these parts. Even now, this is not an easy job. Even experienced artisans need to work carefully.
Archaeologist Liu Zhangcheng is an expert on the weapons found with the terracotta warriors. He's impressed too.
We found more than 30,000 arrowheads in the pits. We tested the arrowheads and found the difference in their sizes to be less than 1 centimeter. Some of them only have a difference of 0.22 millimeters. The difference is very tiny. We know that weapon manufacturing was standardized.
The first emperor's weapon makers signed their work. And so did his warrior makers. Archaeologist Yuan Zhongyi has identified their names.
In each of the figure rings, you can find the name of the craftsperson in the most hidden places. They did this in hope that people would never see their names.
But why did they sign their work when they wanted to remain anonymous? It seems they didn't have a choice.
This is to allow their managers and superiors to check their work. If things are not constructed well, the worker may be asked to recraft them, or in the worst-case scenario, go to jail or be decapitated.
As they began work, the warrior makers must have had 2 major advantages: years of experience on the imperial assembly lines, and knowing that the likely alternative to success was death. Both would no doubt have helped them solve the immense problem of making 8,000 life-size figures in just over 10 years. But how exactly did they do it? After years of trial and error, modern replica makers have learned there's only one way to quickly mass-produce big clay statues: pushing the clay into a mold, waiting 2 or 3 hours for the clay to harden, removing the mold and propping up the clay torso with wooden sticks, while workers carve details, making heads, hands and legs in separate molds, letting everything dry out for 10 days to 2 weeks, then firing all the pieces separately in the kiln. The replica makers have learned that if they made a whole statue, it would collapse under its own weight before it dried, or fill with hot air and explode in the kiln.
Because we mass produce, making hundreds or thousands of copies of one statue, molding is the only way.
And that's not just his opinion. Archaeologists agree that 2,000 years ago, the first emperor's craftsmen knew that molding was the key to efficient mass production.
Mass production was the only way to explain the large numbers of arrowheads we found. The difference between arrowheads is tiny. I think they used molds, so they were able to produce massive amounts of arrowheads with tiny differences.
Case apparently closed. Ancient warrior makers must have met the mass production challenge by using molds, just like modern warrior makers do. There's only one problem. That's not how they did it.
This broken half-body gives us very important information about how terracotta warriors were made. We can see the internal traces of the clay layers here, which shows how the clay coiled up. The sign of how the clay coiled up and joined together is very clear. Here's one clay coil. Here's another clay coil. One coil after another, until the clay layers were all joined up inside the body. You see this layer,